Hi, I'm Sarah Parker Grubb, and you're watching What is Art? You want to read the definition of art?
Art is something beautiful that somebody has made, such as a painting or a statue. Artist, a person who draws or paints pictures or makes other beautiful things.
So come along with me as we investigate. What is art?
So we've been talking about doing a show on art for 6 months or so, and we've been investigating the whole degradation of art, and then we checked it out, and it was like, oh, well, this is what we were already planning on doing a show on, so...
Nice to see it.
Yeah, indeed. So welcome to the Gnostic Media Podcast, Gavin, and
My pleasure to be here, thank you.
You're welcome, and today Sarah is going to co-host with me on our side here in the States, and you're on the other side of the pond in England. And so Sarah's done one show with me before, maybe about a year ago or so. And she's the artist and painter and all of that, and so we figured... since she's been thinking about putting a whole show together on this topic called What is Art?
I've been doing a lot of research for my new What is Art show series, and I'm excited to bring that to you. So stay tuned and stay subscribed.
We figured this would be a good launching point to do sort of an introductory episode to this topic.
Splendid, right.
So, Gavin, it's great to have you on, and when I was listening to your interview on Red Ice, I'm going to read a quote that you said on there that really just struck me.
Okay.
Human history is full of calamity and tragedy and suffering, despite or perhaps because of which we have maintained art, culture, civilization as sort of a buffer in many ways to give form to an existence that is otherwise random and meaningless. I loved hearing you say that because it summed up a lot of what I was searching for in this whole topic of what is art. So do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Thanks very much, Sarah, and I'm very, very glad that it struck you because, I mean, it's one of these things that I'm very, 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 very concerned with. Art and philosophy and culture as consolation and as a way of actually giving form to life because, you know, I mean, I think I might have said it in that interview, but there's a line in Macbeth by Shakespeare where Macbeth reflects on life being a tale told by an idiot filled with sound and fury, signifying nothing. And in a way, it's the kind of formlessness and randomness of life that it actually, as much as anything else, wounds our aesthetic sense of beauty. It's so kind of formless and random, you know, and I think that this has been one of the motivating factors behind art and philosophy since the dawn of man, is to try to imbue this kind of very, very random world with a sense of structure.
Yeah,
to give it
definitely.
shape, to give it form, yes, and also as well to externalize and give a shape to these fleeting sensations.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting. When we were looking up definitions of art and kind of how it had shifted, we were looking in a really old dictionary. The real definitions are all about skill.
Yeah.
And
Who was that guy that we were watching the video of yesterday who took a urinal and turned that into... He was like the first
Marcel
quote-unquote...
Duchamp.
yeah.
Yeah, the quote modern artist.
Also attempting to do, as I understand it, was to devalue the art as an object simply by saying, if I say it's a work of art, that makes it a work of art.
Yeah, but the word work of art, you see, is not so important for me. I don't care about the word art because it's been so, discredited and so forth.
But you in fact contributed to the discrediting, didn't you, quite deliberately?
Deliberately, yes. So I really want to get rid of it because the way many people today have done away with religion. There is a sort of unnecessary adoration of art today, which I find unnecessary. And I think, I don't know, but this is a difficult position because I've been in it all the time and still want to get rid of it, you see. It's not, and I cannot explain everything I do because I do things or people do things and don't know why they do it, you know.
You see, the anti-art movement of Dada, in fact, was proved to be in the interest of art because it regenerated and revived and freshened people's attitude to it.
Yes, sure.
Do you,
it did.
in fact, anticipate that your own contribution, when the final reckoning comes, will have, in fact, contributed to something called art?
I did, in spite of myself, if you wish to say, but I'm sorry. In other words, I would like, but at the same time, if I did, or I had done it, I would completely have been not even noticed, or people would haven't said anything. All right, there are probably 100 people like that who have given up art and condemned it and proved to themselves that it isn't necessary, no more than religion and so forth. And who cares for them? Nobody is.
But nonetheless, a lot of people care about art because it's worth money, and that in fact, in designating certain objects and signing them with your name, you have created a highly commercial object. In fact, in 1964, a new product was actually manufactured so that you could sign it, so that you could produce an edition of ready-mades with a value of something like £2,000.
Well, all right, but this is not high enough. I'll tell you why. Because really, when you compare this to a painting by anybody you might name, you'll ask the difference of price between the painting, at least of a well-known painter and so forth. So, even so, I'm in the lower bracket. That's what I mean. And I excuse for that reason by being in the low bracket instead of a high bracket. So 20,000, 20 million pounds, if you wish to say, when you come to Cézanne or even Picasso. But, see, that doesn't compare with the painting.
No, indeed it doesn't. But if you were following through your determination to devalue art, what would happen if, in fact, these manufactured ready-mades were mass-produced and we could all buy one for 2 shillings? What would happen?
No, you have to sign them. They are signed. They are signed and numbered.
Yes.
An edition of 8 each, like any sculpture. So it's still in the realm of art, in the form of technique. You just make 8 and you sign them and number them. So that's the end of it. You should never have one more, even if you could find them in the shops.
So that in fact, as far as that side of your work has gone, the actual production and signing and selling of your work, you stayed very much within the accepted standards of the art world.
Yes, in fact I had to, because otherwise where would I be? I'd be in an insane asylum probably.
Rather than having skill about anything, it's just about seeing what kind of reaction you can get out of people for the degradation that you contribute to the dumbing down of the masses.
Absolutely. It's the shock value, you see. And it's interesting that you mentioned Duchamp, because to my mind, nothing has actually changed from Duchamp exhibited that urinal. And really, that we're just seeing variations on a theme of that for the last sort of 70 or 80 years. Something happened essentially with Western art in the early 20th century where the content, that is the craft side, the actual art object itself, in value diminished entirely to the context, what you say it's about.
The question, well, what is art? Clearly this is art, and it's so interesting. Just not that long ago, there was a survey of art experts, 500 art experts. They voted this as the most influential modern artwork of all time. So surpassing any Picasso, any Matisse, any Warhol, this was viewed as the quintessential, most important artwork, a urinal. Right? So, and for good measure, in some sense, if you're an art historian, this actually changed the way we think of what the definition of art is. Right? We now have to say something ugly. This was not meant to be beautiful. This is sort of Dadaist ideas of trying to poke fun at the beholder. Right? This was meant to be disgusting and just put up there as an artwork.
You see, like what Duchamp was saying, he referred to that as a ready-made. That you can exhibit any object and you claim it's a work of art, and who can deny it's a work of art? Now you see, before that, of course, anybody would have sensibly said, well, it isn't because it's not made as to be a work of art. Like say,
Sure.
Oscar Wilde said, all art is quite useless. That
Well,
it's
you know,
not functional.
the only use that they're assigning to it anymore is that it gets a reaction out of it. You know, let me just ask you, Gavin, are you familiar with the trivium and quadrivium of the classical 7 liberating arts?
No, I'm not actually.
Okay, well, we're going to read you a little bit here, and this is key to everything. Now, on my website for the last 4 years, going into the 5th year now, we've been teaching about the true classical trivium method and the quadrivium. Now, the trivium is grammar, logic, and rhetoric, always in that order. It answers who, what, where, and when. That's grammar. Why is logic, and rhetoric is how. And then the next stage is the quadrivium, which is arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. Again, always in this order. Now, arithmetic was number in itself, geometry, number in space, music, number in time, and astronomy, number in space and time. And so these arts were, before you could enter a university like Harvard or Yale, etc., in the early 1800s, you had to know and be fully versed in the 7 liberal arts. Yeah. And so, this is really what they're trying to keep people away from and having any skill around this. So this is from the Webster's International Dictionary, 1893, from the definition of art. Sarah?
The arts are divided into various classes. The useful, mechanical, or industrial arts are those in which the hands and body are more concerned than the mind, as in making clothes and utensils. These are called trades. The fine arts are those which have primarily to do with imagination and taste, and are applied to the production of what is beautiful. They include poetry, music, painting, engraving, sculpture, and architecture, but the term is often confined to painting, sculpture, and architecture. The liberal arts, the higher arts, which among the Romans only freemen were permitted to pursue, were, in the Middle Ages, these 7 branches of learning: grammar, logic, rhetoric, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. In modern times, the liberal arts include the sciences, philosophy, history, etc., which compose the course of academial or collegial education, hence degrees in the arts, Master and Bachelor of Arts.
In America, literature and the elegant arts must grow up side by side with the coarser plants of daily necessity. And then synonyms are science, literature, aptitude, readiness, skill, dexterity, adroitness, contrivance, profession, business, trade, calling, cunning, artifice, duplicity, etc. And so what we see here is that clearly modern art is none of these things. It's there to get a rise out of people. It takes no talent to take a paintbrush and splash all over a canvas and sign your name at the bottom. Whereas if you look at all of the classical paintings, for instance, they're all based on the Fibonacci and the golden ratio. And you have the key figure of the art placed in the center of the golden ratio, and then everything is spread out outside of that. This required a core knowledge of the quadrivium and geometry to even start your painting. Whereas, people, these so-called modern artists today, they, so many of them have no talent whatsoever.
Well, this is it, you see, because when you remove craft, when you remove because essentially you need obviously a certain amount of talent, but it's the discipline involved in actually mastering, say, a technique of some description. When you remove that, when you negate that entirely, well, what have you? All you have is sensationalism. And all you have is the kind of the cry of novelty, and of course nothing is as guaranteed to be obsolete as something that's shocking last week. It's now nothing.
When you set out to challenge all the established values, your means was shock. You shocked the cubists, you shocked the public, you shocked the buying public. Yes. Do you think the public can be shocked anymore by anything it sees?
Finish. That's over. You cannot shock the public. At least with the same means. To shock the public, we'd have to, I don't know what.
We have to remember that it was a very, 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 in terms of history, a very, very brief time. A very brief, this window opened up where, like, say, for example, if you think of, whilst most of the European art produced was amazing, but the vast majority of it up until, like, say, the 1800s would have been in the service of, say, the aristocracy or the church. You know, so it would have been selling an agenda. It would, I mean, you know, it doesn't mean that they weren't brilliant artists. You know, because I mean, particularly if we're talking about the art of the Italian Renaissance, I mean, absolutely brilliant. But I mean, essentially they were employed. They would have been employed by the church, or they would have been employed by the aristocracy. A very, very brief period where you had the idea of the free artist, where the artist would actually, they had a duty to their art, to their work, and it was a kind of a one. Yeah.
Weren't they? It's a trade where you're taught by a master and they teach a pupil.
Yeah, the apprentice system. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Just with the idea of the apprentice, of course, it's going to be, somewhat controlled because they're masters in that specific skilled art hired to do that thing.
Yeah. But at the same time, though, what better way to learn? What better way to learn? I mean, you know, if only I could have learned to paint from, say, somebody like that, if I could have been in one of these studios where you would spend, essentially, I mean, if you were kind of like in Michelangelo's studio, you might spend a year just mixing colour. But that's mixing colour under the tutelage of a master, and you will certainly know how to mix colour after that.
I have a painting teacher who was trained in the Tibetan lineage, and he was trained that way, and, you know, where he spent a half a year on just an eye.
But let's not forget here, though, the colors back then were rocks and minerals and plants and things like this.
That's right, yeah.
So they, you know, it wasn't just about, you know, going to the store and buying a tube of paint and then mixing the colors. You had to make the paint and every part about it. So you went all the way down to the foundational skills of how to be an artist.
Absolutely, and it had something sacrosanct about it, because you couldn't, as you said, you couldn't just go down to the store and buy a tube of ultramarine. The name implied that it came from far away. The materials for it. So you wouldn't just, there was none of this Jackson Pollock nonsense of flinging paint around the place. This stuff is precious, and you would treat it accordingly as something special. You know, I mean, it's very interesting, like, because for most human history, music has been a very, very sacred commodity. In most tribal peoples, music is a sacred ritual activity. And there's something, I mean, the connection between the music and the transcendental seems to be innate in us. And what have we done to music, particularly in the last, the last sort of 30-odd years, or no, the last sort of 20 years? You can download it, you can delete it, it's nothing. And we're surrounded by it. You can't go into a shop. You can't. It's booming from cars and stuff like that. All of it is just disposable, and it means nothing because it's everywhere. It's a little bit like sex everywhere. It removes the personal and the transcendental aspect of it, and just turns it into just this yet another base commodity to be controlled and disposed of when it's of no use to you.
Starry, starry night.
Another thing tying in Dave McGowan's work, are you familiar with his article that talks about Don McLean's American Pie song?
And about concern with Altamont. Yeah.
Yeah, and then so it's interesting, Don McLean's other famous song was Vincent, which ties directly into
Gogh,
your cult of personality and Van Gogh. Yeah, will you talk more about that?
Okay, well, I mean, the reason why I kind of used Van Gogh was because in this presentation, I said, kind of hands up, anybody here hasn't heard of Van Gogh?
Anyone here hadn't heard of Vincent van Gogh? Anyone here hasn't heard of the story of Vincent van Gogh's life, not selling any paintings, cutting off a bit of the ear, killing himself? You all know that?
Of course, everyone's heard of Van Gogh. And I would say, well, why? Why is it that everyone's heard of Van Gogh and not, say, some of his contemporaries, like, say, Seurat or Pissarro or somebody like that? And what it seems to be, it's the biographical factor. I mean, his life story is very, very moving. It's very tragic. But I feel that it's been used deliberately to create an image of the artist as outsider, as tortured soul. The darker and more painful your experiences, the more authentic they are. Vincent is a great artist, not because he was a good painter, but because he suffered and committed suicide.
The most unusual people in the world, truly unique, but he is the author of a book called The Van Gogh Blues, The Creative Person's Path Through Depression. And the gist of this is that people who are creative do have a tendency, as we know, in many, many cases, to be little nuts, okay? So why is that, first of all?
Well, I think we're talking specifically about depression.
Well, I'm just kidding, but yes.
And I think they tend to be depressed because it's existential depression they're suffering from. Namely, they decide that they want to hold meaning afloat for the world. They want to be the cultural witnesses, the cultural actors. And so because they want to keep meaning afloat, when they have difficulty doing that, and all of us as creative people do have difficulty doing that, then the meaning seems to drain out of their lives, and the depression they experience is this existential depression. So I think 100% of creative people are going to experience this kind of depression at least sometimes in their life.
And that's why I think that he's been very, very much used to sell the artist as kind of, suffering, tortured madman, this idea. Because then, of course, what happens is, if you're standing in some kind of Museum of Modern Art or the Tate Modern or one of these things, and you're seeing a light flickering on and off or a can of shit or something, before you dismiss it, you might just say, well, people didn't get Vincent's work in his life. Maybe I just don't get it. And
right.
And into the breach will step an army of curators and critics and academics whose livelihoods depend upon you listening to them and giving them kudos, who will tell you why it's not just a light going on and off or a can of shit. And I feel that he's this
right.
poor guy, as if his life wasn't difficult enough. I feel he's been used in his death to sell a kind of a horrible kind of nihilistic agenda that was very, very much would have been against what I personally think he would have been about when he was alive.
Yeah, so I mean, lots of people know him from that song, Vincent, and in those lyrics.
Yeah, the world has never meant for one as
for
beautiful.
Your sanity.
Yeah. That's the world. The world has never meant for one as beautiful as you. Well, actually, the world is meant for beautiful people.
Right.
It's just been sort of hijacked, or the appearance of things
exactly.
have been hijacked.
What is the single most important concept that you would like listeners of the audience to take away from this episode on What is Art Here With Sarah?
Firstly, that art is yours. That being an artist isn't some major mysterious kind of thing. Anybody can become an artist. It doesn't mean you're going to be a ghost, but all you have to do is give it the discipline and the attention it deserves. That if you spend time, if you pick up a pencil, a piece of paper, and you start drawing, you will get better. It's not about being the best. It's not about competition. Because if it was about competition, when the first person rocked up with a wheel, his neighbours would have said, oh, we're never going to top that, so we're not going to try anything. It isn't about competition. It's about the wonderful, beautiful opportunity of creating something that wasn't there beforehand. But with that gift comes a responsibility. It's also our responsibility to venerate art and to protect it. It's worth it, because it's a question of whether we want to live in essentially, I don't know, under the Sistine Chapel ceiling or under a dung heap. This is your choice, but you have a choice. But the thing is, it is open to you. It is not about competition. You will get better. It is a wonderful pleasure. And I would say as well, think about when you were a small child. I mean, I remember when I was little in school, and we had wall-to-wall English, Irish, maths, English, Irish, maths, English, Irish, maths every fucking day. And a Friday afternoon, for an hour, we had arts and crafts. So you had an opportunity to draw and paint. And all of the children were delighted, not just arty children, all of the children. Something Picasso said is that children are naturally artists. It's that we forget as we get older how to be artists. You can do that. It's not about competition, not about being the best, and you do get better. It is gratifying because if you stick with something, like if you sit at the piano and learn to play, you will get better at it, and there's nothing quite as rewarding as that. I mean, I remember when I first started playing the guitar when I was about 14 or 15, and I remember hammering away on the opening chords of Space Oddity by David Bowie. I was like, drum, ground control to major, pause while I tried to find the next chord. 2 minutes later, boom, tom, doing that for a couple of weeks. And the third week, I just came in, picked up the guitar, and one chord went into another one. And in a very, very basic way, it was the start of making music. And there's no buzz can compare to that. There's no buzz that can compare to your own personal little victories, your own little successes. It's worth it. And anyway, it's a question of anyways, like if you don't participate, the whole thing is going to go to hell in a handcart.
Right. Gavin, thank you so much for being on the Gnostic Media Podcast.
It's been great to be with you. Thanks very, very much. Thank you, it's been my pleasure.
With eyes that know the darkness in my soul, shadows on the hills, sketch the trees and the daffodils.
Thanks for watching, and stay engaged till next episode. Get out there, be creative, find your own artistic core, and then make yourself expressed. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.